And a good afternoon to you. Rich Capparela here with Music Director of the Pacific Symphony, Carl St.Clair, for our fifth broadcast, a pre-concert anticipating starting in 1 hour at 7 o'clock on KUSC at 91.5 and other frequencies, as well as KUSC.org. The fifth concert in the Pacific Symphony's 2019-2020 season. The orchestra only got as far as concert number 7 before our world changed. So we are up to the fifth broadcast being repeated tonight on KUSC starting in an hour. And Carl, as always, great to see you.
It's wonderful to see you. And as much as I love seeing you, Rich, seeing the orchestra behind you really warms my heart. And I can't wait till we're back on that stage.
Yeah,
and me standing on the
conductor there.
Yeah, there is a conductor there. That's the last, just seeing me on a podium is already a dream.
So the concert actually doesn't have you on the podium for this one. Instead, it's the Austrian conductor, Christian Arming, who will be the guest conductor, and there'll be one soloist in this concert. And it's only 2 pieces on this particular program.
Yeah, but what 2 pieces they are: the Beethoven Violin Concerto and the G Major Symphony No. 8 of Anthony Dvorak. And we're just so delighted that both, Clara Jumi-Kang and Christian Arming are making their debuts with the Pacific Symphony. They're both just wonderful artists, and I couldn't have welcomed them more warmly. They're just fantastic artists, and did such a great job, as all of your audiences will hear come 7 o'clock.
Yeah, so the program begins with the Beethoven Violin Concerto, a work that was performed, first performance, and then was pretty much neglected for a couple of decades. And then it was Joachim who came across the score and said, well, this doesn't stink so bad. Maybe I'll start playing it.
And Joachim was 12 years old when that happened, and Felix Mendelssohn conducted the performance. That's what just blows my mind.
Yeah. And so, the rest, as they say, is history. And then after intermission, we get by far the sunniest Dvorak Symphony, No. 8. I guess he was being given an honorary degree for a scientific organization.
Arts and Sciences, right?
And so this piece, I mean, it just warms your heart. It does have a heartbreaking wind solo in the slow movement, but overall, it's just, especially for a Czech, and being half Czech, I speak with some authority, for a Czech piece of music, it just is uncharacteristically sunny,
Well, as we know, Dvorak had a garden where he was composing this, and loved roaming in the woods and writing. And so you feel the countryside, you feel that joy, that euphoria, that sort of openness and warmth. So it's great. It's a wonderful symphony and very often performed. And we're just so happy to be able to present that tonight along with the great Beethoven Concerto.
And speaking of the Beethoven Concerto, just as a little tease for folks, and then we'll talk a little bit about the piece itself, but how about just the last 3 minutes or so of this performance that we'll be hearing in its entirety starting at the top of the next hour. So here is Clara Jumi-Kang with Christian Arming, guest conductor of the Pacific Symphony, in just a little bit of what you're going to be hearing later on, music from Beethoven's Violin Concerto, here during this pre-concert for tonight's broadcast on KUSC. There
Wow.
is a performance by Clara Jumi-Kang.
Well, you can see that she's a virtuoso, which she's been called, but she was also a child prodigy. You know, she started violin at a very, very early age, at age 3. And, you know, she's actually German, of South Korean descent. Both of her parents were opera singers. Philip Kang was a well-known bass, and Hanmi Lee was a soprano. And so she grew up around a musical world and was already making her debut with the Hamburg Symphony Orchestra when she was 5 years old.
Yeah.
And by the time she was admitted to Juilliard, the list of orchestras she'd already soloed with is extreme. I mean, so she is a wonderful violinist. And as you can see, I mean, it's very touching when you read about and know about her feelings about this concerto and how she was worried about how to control it. And because it is that monument, you know, it is that monument that almost all violinists that I've ever done it with are hold in highest regard and highest respect, because it's such a great concerto. And you know, it was composed in 1806, and around that time Beethoven was writing, let's say he was writing the 4th Symphony. It was a couple of years before the 5th and 6th symphonies were written. And as you say, Franz Clement, who premiered it, was also helping Beethoven compose and do some of the violin writing for his opera, which later became Fidelio, which wasn't Fidelio. At this time, it was Leonora, but it became Fidelio. So there's just all kinds of wonderful information around this and a great story.
Well, how about the premiere? I mean, if I may, Michael Clive shares in his program notes. And by the way, folks, if you go to pacificsymphony.org, you can actually just do a little bit of navigation. You can actually get the program notes for tonight's concert. So by all means, visit pacificsymphony.org, and you can read what I'm reading right now, which is Michael Clive's program notes. He talks about the first performance. He says, Beethoven was persuaded to write the concerto for one of the best-known violin virtuosos of his day, Franz Clement, and everything about the circumstance of its creation seems to have contributed to a circus-like atmosphere at the premiere. The contemporary accounts sound dreadful to us now. Clement was, by all accounts, a remarkable soloist who had been a spectacular child prodigy, but he never outgrew a penchant for daredevil showmanship. According to some hearsay reports, he insisted on sight-reading the concerto and inserting a sonata of his own composition in the middle or at the end of Beethoven's work. And in performing his own sonata, he is said to have held the violin upside down and played on one string.
And there's even further folklore, you know. that Beethoven didn't complete it and got it to him so late that he had to sight read it, you know, and that this little sonata, this composition that he wrote and played with his violin upside down on a single string, some reports say it came at the end of the concerto, which you just heard, the finale. Some people said it came between the first and second movement. I mean, I love these kinds of stories, and it adds so much flavor and color to the whole thing. And what I find interesting, you know, it kind of appeared to me like the fifth and sixth symphonies and the fourth piano concerto. So that's like December, was premiered in December. This was premiered on December 23rd. And I kept wondering why so many premieres around late December, late December, and or April or May of these pieces. And I got to doing a little research, and it comes to find out that that's when musicians, the best musicians, were available, because opera houses were not allowed to have opera performances during Advent or Lent.
Really?
Yep.
Really?
I mean, why else would you have a premiere of a piece like this? And this was, by the way, a benefit concert for Franz Clement himself. Why would you have it on the 23rd of December in the Theater an der Wien, which has to be as cold as you could possibly imagine. And you know, so, and it's because those musicians that were really sought after, who were playing in the opera pits and in the theaters and things like that, were not allowed. Those were not allowed to have opera performances during Lent or Advent.
Amazing. Amazing. I guess it goes back to the weird history of opera that, you know, early on in the history of opera, the female roles were sung by men because women weren't allowed, you know, I mean, you learn a lot.
Yeah, you sure do.
So the Beethoven was not an immediate success, as we said, but it has become one of the most often performed. If we include, let's say, the Mendelssohn Concerto, the Tchaikovsky, as well as the Max Bruch Concerto No. 1, and I'm sure I'm missing, Brahms, and then maybe there's one or two more that are absolutely central to the violin concerto repertory for the Romantic era.
Well, as you said, after this failed performance in 1806, you know, it just languished in absolute silence until 1844, when, as we talked earlier, Joachim found it, and Felix Mendelssohn conducted the premiere with a 12-year-old Joseph Joachim. And by the way, that's a single year before the great Mendelssohn Violin Concerto was premiered,
which was one of his very last major
works. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the first half of the concert, just the Beethoven Concerto.
And by the way, she plays a beautiful Bach encore. You have to stay tuned for that, and don't go get a sandwich after that, after the Beethoven Concerto, because she plays an exquisite unaccompanied encore that you just have to hear.
And for those who may have joined us late, just to fill you in, we're talking about Clara Jumi-Kang will be the violin soloist. The guest conductor is Christian Arming for this performance tonight. We're broadcasting once again the fifth concert from the 2019-20 season of Pacific Symphony on KUSC at 91.5, as well as at KUSC.org. A rebroadcast. Normally, we would have been running the second half during the summertime of the season. However, this year is just a tad different than most seasons. So here's what we're doing. And in order to enhance your enjoyment of tonight's concert, we've got Carl and I together for a pre-concert that will be ending in about 15 minutes or so. So you'll have some time to make your dinner and do a quick meal before the concert itself starts at 7 o'clock. So the second half of the concert is Dvorak and the Sunny Eighth Symphony. But Carl, before we get to that, you've got a strong connection with the whole history of the Czech Republic.
Yeah, and before we get into that, I mean, my grandfather is Rehach, which is Slecha, and he was Moravian, and but before that,
my mother was Svoboda.
But you know, Christian Arming is coming to us as our first, as a guest of the first part of this year. It's his debut with us, and I'm just so happy because he and I have a lot of connections. And he has a lot of connections with my teacher, who also has a lot of connections, and he has connections with Dvorak and the Czech Republic, in the fact that he too, like I was, from 1985 to 1990, I was the assistant to Seiji Ozawa. And though Christian is born in Korea. He spent some time, sorry, I said that wrong. He's Vienna. He's born in Vienna. He spent some time in Japan, and he assisted Seiji. And also, my conducting teacher was born in Lucerne, and Christian Arming, Walter de Clou is my conducting teacher. Christian was the music director of the Lucerne Symphony, and he was also the music director of the Janáček Philharmonic for just a little bit. So he has a great connection with Janáček and that whole Dvorak, Janáček, and the Czechoslovakian musical language. And my conducting teacher, Dr. Walter de Clou, in 1942, he came to the United States at the invitation of Arturo Toscanini, who he met in Lucerne at the Lucerne Festival. And Toscanini invited him in 1939 to come to be his assistant with the NBC, because during their time together at the Lucerne Festival, Dr. de Clou had prepared the Verdi Requiem for the great Arturo Toscanini. And he sort of fell in really good favor. And so Toscanini invited him. And in 1942, of course, he joined the American Army. And right away, everybody realized this was a soldier with a lot of different assets that could be used. First of all, he spoke 5 languages, all of the languages that were required in the European theater of operation. And so pretty much right away, he became a lieutenant as the interpreter, one of the interpreters to none other than General Patton. And in May of 1945, when General Patton helped liberate Czechoslovakia from the Nazi soldiers, they stayed there for a while, and de Clou was in that particular group. And as things began to settle down, there began to be more theater. There was an opera production of Smetana's Martyr Bride. And on the 20th of July, that word C-E-R-V-E-N-C-E means July. On 1945, in July 20th, Dr. de Clou, my conducting teacher, conducted the Pilsen. This is in Pilsen, this is all happening. The Pilsen Philharmonic in a concert, standing in his American uniform, but he was instructed that you cannot speak Czech or German to the orchestra. You can only speak to them in English. But he conducted a program of the Dvorak's Carnival Overture. The program included the 9th Symphony from the New World, Smetana's Mavla, and At Twilight by Zdeněk Filič. So this is an actual picture that I was sent by his daughter, Didi de Clou, Didi Brink, and this is Dr. de Clou standing in front of that particular placard from 1945, just before the concert took place. So I'm really proud of this.
Yeah, in fact, if I can, while we hear a little bit more music by Dvorak shortly, I will see if I can put up the photograph of the two of you together. So fingers are crossed on that. So Dvorak was one of those composers who is, I mean, I love the fact that a Czech managed to show American composers how to write American music, how to draw from the soil, and create music that was based on the music all around them all the time. It's amazing that no one had really thought to do that effectively. There have been some stories of somebody else about 60 years earlier trying to do the same thing, but Dvorak obviously succeeded in ways that were remarkable. Should we hear a little bit of the 8th Symphony after we talk about the fact that it has a great, is it English horn solo? Is that the English horn?
It has beautiful flute solos. It has English horn solo. It has beautiful solos by the cellos as they begin. I'm not sure exactly what clip you're going to hear, but I think it's from the Allegretto.
Well, let's find out here. Bear with us, folks. You know, we're doing this sort of on the fly, and I will, let's see here. All right, let's see if we can do this. Here is music by Dvorak. I know it's this much, Carl. I can tell you it's about 3 minutes. So here we go with the last 3 minutes or so, I believe, of the Dvorak 8th Symphony. Whoops. Sorry about that.
Wow. You know, the lilt, the charm, the lush. You know, Brahms was a huge supporter of Dvorak. And when he was writing this, because Wagner died just about, well, this was composed in 1888 and 1889 and premiered in 1890. But, you know, what's interesting is that he had just kind of gotten over this Wagner, adoring qualities of Wagner and Brahms, and you can hear it all in there. And what I always find interesting about this particular symphony is what was going on contextually in the musical world at the same time. So around the same time, give or take a few months, because, you know, like this symphony was composed in 1 year, but actually not premiered until 1890, but it was, Dvorak conducted it in February of 1890, but it was written a little bit earlier in 1889. But Mahler was conducting his first symphony, a 28-year-old Gustav Mahler. Richard Strauss, 24-year-old, was doing rehearsals in Weimar, my former orchestra, doing rehearsals of his Don Juan, which was pretty much ensured him to be the torchbearer of the German composers after Wagner died in 1883. Scheherazade was being written. Rimsky-Korsakov, Tchaikovsky was writing his Fifth Symphony. So, I mean, it's very interesting to hear this in that context of all those other great pieces. And by the way, you were mentioning castrati and female voices and male voices. You know, Fauré was writing his Requiem, and in those days when that was premiered, the females were not allowed to sing in church, and so all the parts had to be sung by male choristers. And so it's very interesting. I find it so interesting, and you can see, you know, Christian's having the time of his life, just swooning, and the musicians are just sounding so fantastic in this music, which just draws the best heart from everybody.
Yeah. By the way, my apologies for showing up with email while we were trying to watch the Dvorak. That will teach me to try to get that photograph. I'll have a baby picture. That's what I was trying to do, and I was able to do it just now. So I'd like to share with you a baby picture here. This baby. So there you are with Maestro Duclos. And what year would that have been?
Yeah, this is Maestro Duclos, and this would have been in the 1990s when I was in Austin conducting the Austin Lyric Opera, probably in Rigoletto. Huh. And he was forever the teacher, and someone who was constantly wanting to profess, and he was just an amazing man, and gave me a lot. And he died in 1997, born in 1913. So I feel very blessed to have found such a wealth of knowledge about opera and romantic music there in South Texas at the University of Texas at Austin.
Huh. So that is our program for this week. It'll be the Beethoven Concerto with Clara Jumi-Kang as soloist, and Christian Arming, with whom you share a lot of history, as guest conductor for this concert. Both of them making, you said, their debuts with Pacific Symphony.
Yes, and both incredible. The orchestra loved it, audiences loved them, and so it's just, you know, when I think that was just a few months back in our lives, and then, you know, as you said, we had 2 more concerts, and then we completely became silenced. But when I see the orchestra sitting on the Segerstrom Hall, the Renee and Henry Segerstrom stage, listening to them sound so fantastic and lush and colorful with their sounds, I mean, it just breaks my heart, but it also gives me such anticipation and motivation and inspiration to do all that we can to make sure that never goes away, and that when we come back, that we can be like that. And so to all of your listeners and to everyone, all the musicians, I miss you very much, and I miss being with you on that stage, and I trust that you're well. And to all your KUSC family and listeners, and to all the subscribers and Pacific Symphony family members that are tuning in, both to this little pre-concert talk and also the concert itself, and to all of our concerts, just know that we appreciate everything that you're doing to ensure that the Pacific Symphony can stay healthy, and that we can re-emerge from this time, this craziness, with a lot more strength and respect and love for classical music, for Dvorak, for artists, for your Pacific Symphony, and for each other. So thank you very much.
Well said. And, it's funny, classical music has always been the thing that has kept me going my entire life. I mean, since I was a teenager, it was like, why wasn't I told about this sooner? And more than ever, this music just brings such solace, just because of the timelessness, because that, yeah, there might be a little bit of rough period here and there, but eventually, the sun comes out again. So this stuff is more essential than ever before.
Well, I can guarantee you with these two works, the sun will shine in your life, regardless of where you are, emotionally, personally, or whether you're inside or outside. It will bring some light into your life. So please join us.
Yeah, so tonight, starting in 1/2 hour, it will be on KUSC at 91.5 and the other frequencies of KUSC, as well as online streaming at KUSC.org, a rebroadcast of the mid-January performance by Pacific Symphony Kristin Arminges conductor and the Beethoven Violin Concerto, as well as the Dvorak 8th Symphony. And just to give you a tease, next week, same time, same place, we'll be here again for a pre-concert for the 6th concert in the season. That will include the mighty Symphonie Fantastique by Hector Berlioz. The conductor for that concert, one Carl St.Clair. So we'll look forward to seeing you on the podium again for that one. So Carl, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Rich. It's great to see you. See everybody in a half an hour.
Yeah, all right. Enjoy the concert tonight. Thank you for being here.
Bye-bye.